Is the Rodrygo chat serious? Are Arsenal really in with a chance of signing the Real Madrid superstar? We're going to get into that and loads more on today's episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Thanks for joining me. Hey everybody, how are we doing? Happy Wednesday and welcome back to another live episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Hope you're all good. Hope you're all enjoying your Wednesday so far. You might be listening to this on Thursday or Friday or Saturday. Who knows? Hope you're enjoying your day wherever you are, whenever you are listening and tuning in. I really, really appreciate all the love and support. I always find it amazing, actually, how many people remain interested in the podcast, even when there are no games to talk about. Because this is not a podcast or a channel that was built on trying to be controversial or, trying to go down that road of, trying to sensationalize everything. Okay, during the transfer window, we're going to chat about the rumors. And I know full well, just as well as you guys do, that a lot of the rumors we talk about, they might not amount to anything, but we talk about them because there isn't any football to talk about. And so it always astonishes me how many people stay loyal, stay engaged, and stay with us during the summer. So a massive thank you to all of you for that. Look, we've got a fair bit to get into today. We're obviously going to focus on the Rodrygo stuff. That's our top story today. We're going to discuss how serious these links between Arsenal and the Brazilian really, really are, because it's something that we've heard about on and off since the season ended. We heard about it a lot just before the season ended in the build-up to that final game of the season away at Southampton. Then it went quiet. Then it looked like it was on again. Then it looked like, actually, no, he was happy and was going to stay at Real Madrid. Then over the last sort of 24, 48 hours, a load of reports started coming out to the contrary of that. Honestly, we're going to try and make sense of it. We're going to try and dive into this a little bit more. And I'll give you guys my thoughts on how legitimate I think the Rodrygo links are, because this is a player that so many of us would love to see come to the Arsenal. We'd all love to see him come in. We'd all love to see him bolster our attacking options and give us that something more, that something different. But whether it's likely or not, I think is another story. So we'll get into all of that. We'll talk about it. I know it probably sounds like I'm going to say it's not based on my tone, but look, I do think there's something in this. I'm just not sure quite how much. So we're going to cover that off on today's pod. But I do want to start off by very, very quickly wishing Kieran Tierney all the best. Kieran Tierney has officially rejoined Celtic. They put out a little video yesterday announcing that, which was really nice. And congratulations to him on finding his way back to his boyhood club, the club he loves. And I genuinely do wish him all the best there. Top pro and a really bloody good defender. A really good defender, despite the injury problems that he's had to deal with over the last few years. I also want to just quickly touch on England's defeat last night. Declan Rice, Miles Lewis-Skelly and Bukayo Saka all started for England in their shock defeat to Senegal. I didn't realize this, but Senegal are the first African team to beat England. I didn't know that. That's quite the achievement in terms of having that on your CV. I'm surprised, because I think there's been some really good African teams over the years, and to think that England have never lost to one is prior to yesterday is mad to me. But it appears that is very much the case. So congratulations to Senegal on that. But there's been a lot of discourse, hasn't there, off the back of this? A lot of frustration around England, as there always seems to be. It feels like whatever England do, nobody's satisfied. They get to semi-finals, they get to finals. It's not good enough. Only winning is good enough. But it's the thing that always gets me with England is the entitlement. It's like everybody looks at this nation that haven't won, by the way, a major tournament since 1966 and expects them to win every single game, and expects them to kind of wipe away or wipe the floor with, I should say, anybody that they're facing up against. And it's just that entitlement that drives me mad. Look, if we're being honest, the two results in this run of games, a narrow 1-0 victory over a very, very poor Andorra side, that didn't exactly fill people with confidence. And now this. People will moan, and people will now question Thomas Tuchel. Some of our players are getting a bit of stick online, which I think is ridiculous when you consider that the whole team have been really poor across these two games. But where I will give England a free pass here, and where I'll give anyone a free pass really, is that we're in this post-season international break, which is just a load of absolute nonsense, right? It's an absolute load of crap. And what you've got players that just don't want to play in them. They just don't want to play in them. They're exhausted. They're tired. Their eyes are on their holidays. They want to go off and sun themselves and recover and recuperate ahead of a really, really big club campaign. Some of them have to go to the Club World Cup, which is probably winding them up. I know people say, "Oh, well, it's good. It's the Club World Cup. It's prestigious." Come on, man. It's a money spinning exercise. And until I watch it and until they change my mind, FIFA, that is, about how exciting or interesting a competition this is going to be, I'm not going to be behind it. Also, you've got them handing out tickets literally for the games because people are not buying them. So, that shows you what the appeal is like at the moment. But the point I'm trying to make here is that in this post-season international break, you are going to get weird results. You're going to get anomalies. You're going to get rotation. You're going to get players that are already running on empty, just going through the motions. And that's exactly what we saw from England yesterday. And it's bad enough when they're qualifiers or when they are Nations League games where there's actually something at stake. Imagine what it's like trying to motivate yourself for a post-season friendly, which is what that was. So I'm not really too fussed about what we saw yesterday. I don't think anybody should read into it too much. Thomas Tuchel's a top coach. He's got some great players there, and I think he'll give it a right good go when it comes to the World Cup, which is ultimately what he's been brought in to win. I wouldn't overreact based on that result last night, and I don't think it's even worth really the deep analysis that it's getting from some people. Okay, let's move on. We're going to start talking transfers now. Leroy Sane is closing in on a move to Galatasaray, which means we won't be signing him. We talked a lot about this when he was really heavily linked. And I said, look, if Leroy Sane was coming in as that third attacking option, if we were going to bring in a winger and a striker and Leroy Sane was an extra, then I'm fine with it. Because I do think Leroy Sane is a talented footballer. I think if you look back at the season he had in the campaign just gone with Bayern, it's clear that he can still affect games at this stage in his career. It's clear that he can still impact. It's still that he's got a lot to, it's still clear, I beg your pardon, that he's got a lot to offer. But we've kind of been scarred and burned by some of the recent signings that we've made. We've brought in the likes of, Raheem Sterling. That didn't work out. Obviously, we brought in Willian, a player who was also in the latter stages of his career, and that didn't really work out either. So I think for Arsenal, we've kind of tried this approach of trying to bring in a sort of ready-made, experienced attacking player and just plug them into our attack and hope that they're going to give us an extra bit of power in that final third. It doesn't work. We need to recruit smart. We need to recruit well, and we need to recruit with not just the short term in mind, but with the medium term in mind as well. I've kind of come around to that idea as this window has progressed, because at the beginning, for me, it was very much win now, and it is still the remit. But I guess I look at it slightly differently now, because I think if you recruit for the medium to long term, but you, for example, in the centre forward position, I think that if you get Benjamin Sesko, a lot of people say he's not ready. A lot of people say he's a bit raw. I'm fine with that because we've got Kai Havertz. So I'm not putting the responsibility or the burden of that centre forward role and everything that comes with it on either one of those two players. It will be a shared burden and a shared responsibility, which is why I think actually signing a sort of player with a view to the medium term is not the worst thing in the world here. And also people like Leroy Sane, you just don't know how what he's been doing in the Bundesliga recently is going to translate into the Premier League. We've seen him in the Premier League before, and he was good. He was impactful, top player, but he kept picking up injuries. He's obviously had those types of issues throughout his career. It feels like they've eased up a little bit recently, but that's largely because he's not really starting games. He only started 50% of Bayern's games last season. Or I think, let me rephrase that. I think of the 30 appearances he made in the Bundesliga, he only started 15 of those games. The rest of them were off the bench, last 20, last 30. And when you're managing a player like that, that's fine. And that's why when I was saying about maybe us signing him, it would have to be as that kind of, squad player late in a game option, someone that you bring on to try and give you that little bit of X factor in the final third, but nothing more than that. You could not afford to build your recruitment strategy and have Leroy Sane being a real kind of key central cog in that. So I'm glad that's not going to be the case. Surprised he's gone to Galatasaray, though. Thought he could have gone elsewhere. Thought he could have come to England if he was interested. Thought he might have actually stayed at Bayern Munich, but obviously that's not the case. David Ornstein is saying that Galatasaray have agreed to sign him as a 3-year agent, 3-year deal worth up to 15 million euros per year. So about 5 million euros a year, but in place once the Bayern Munich terms expire. Al Hilal and Fenerbahce were keen as well. Bayern wanted the renewal, but the 29-year-old has chosen to go to Galatasaray. Probably wants that little bit of security in terms of the length of the contract that maybe Bayern at this stage in his career weren't willing to offer him. So yeah, we'll see. Okay, let's move on. That's the latest on Leroy Sane. We're not signing him. Make of that what you will. Some people will rejoice. Others will think maybe we missed out on a good option there. But he's going to Galatasaray, and that's that. Okay, we'll bring you a little bit of an update now on Benjamin Sesko. This feels like it's going to be the longest running saga of Arsenal summer, doesn't it? According to Miguel Delaney yesterday, Benjamin Sesko wants to go to Arsenal and is energized by the prospect, with personal terms seen as no issue. The primary issue right now is between the two clubs. RB Leipzig are holding firm on receiving his release clause, now understood to exceed £65 million. We were talking about it yesterday, weren't we? Simon Collins had reported that RB Leipzig were looking for £70 million for Benjamin Sesko. And so if Miguel Delaney is saying that release clause exceeds 65, that kind of fits in line and it kind of works, doesn't it, with what we've been talking about. So that feels like that could be pretty much on the nose in terms of what they're asking for. I'd imagine a bit like the Martin Zubimendi situation. Arsenal are looking for a way here in which they can do this deal without paying that release clause up front. I talked about it when we were initially linked with Martin Zubimendi. I said, there's a good chance that Arsenal will try and find a way of meeting that amount of money, but trying to do it in a payment schedule that maybe works best for the club. In the end, based on what we've been reading, it looks as though Arsenal have had to pay a little bit more, probably 5 million euros more than the release clause, just because they want to go down that route in terms of the payment structure. We might have to do something similar here with Benjamin Sesko to get this deal done. I think for Arsenal now, we know that the centre forward position is really, really important. And I'm not saying that we're going to miss out. I'm not saying that this is all going to fall apart. But it would be incredibly embarrassing if we weren't to get one of our primary targets in that centre forward position. Now, Arsenal have been watching this player and have been keen on this player for such a long time. You'd think that they wouldn't allow this to potentially fall apart based on just a few million quid. I mean, it's easy for us to say, if I had a few million quid, I wouldn't be giving it up very easily. I'll tell you that. But I think people are maybe panicking a little bit. I think that this is just one of those things where everybody wants to do their best in terms of the negotiations. Arsenal want to get the best possible deal. RB Leipzig want to get the best possible deal for themselves. I think this is just one where we need to stay patient, and this is just one where we need to stay relaxed. He clearly is interested in a move to Arsenal, and it'll be nice if we get him in, of course. But yeah, not massively worried by this. I think eventually through negotiations we will get to that price point where RB Leipzig is satisfied and we will get a deal that we're able to make happen. I think where some of the frustration, maybe anxiety, has kind of come from over the last couple of days is that there has been some reported interest in the player from Saudi Arabia. Sam Dean reported yesterday. He said, my understanding is that 2 Saudi Pro League clubs have recently expressed an interest in signing Benjamin Sesko. The 22-year-old is thought to currently prefer a move, though, to another European club. But this is the killer bit. But the situation is fluid. So is Benjamin Sesko open to move into Saudi? I don't think it's his preference. I agree with that. I think he's very much someone who's shown in the past that it isn't just about money and status. He could have made the move last summer. He didn't. He wanted to stay there. He wanted to continue developing. He's clearly a young lad with his head screwed on who feels like, actually development is the most important thing at this stage in his career. Why would he throw that all in the bin and go to Saudi Arabia? I just don't think he will. I think he will end up an Arsenal player, but I think, as I say, there's going to be a lot of negotiations. And we were talking about it yesterday, weren't we? Somebody asked me in the chat box, do people deliberately lie about transfers? And I said to you, look, I don't know of anybody deliberately lying. People are only as good as the information that they have and the information that they get. But what I did say was that you do get stories planted. And this Saudi stuff feels like it's been planted. It feels like someone's gone out there, planted this story in order to maybe hurry Arsenal up a little bit in terms of their negotiations, to try and light a rocket up the backsides of the Arsenal hierarchy, as if to say, look, if you don't get moving with this, if you don't get closer to what it is that RB Leipzig are looking for, someone could come along and take your player. Somebody could come along and steal him from underneath your nose. And you know that the Saudis would have no problem in matching or even beating the personal terms. So I feel like this is maybe a bit of a plant. I feel like with the Saudi Pro League, they're obviously on this massive recruitment drive again to try and bring as many eyes and as much coverage to their competition as possible. We went through this the summer before last, where, Chelsea, for example, made an absolute ton of money selling people that nobody else would buy over to the Saudi Pro League and making good money. Then it seemed to quieten down a little bit, but we did hear going into this summer, to be fair, that there was going to be a real push again, in order to try and bring players there. And I think, a lot of it is being briefed. A lot of it is probably not going to come to fruition. I think for me, you think about what the Saudis have done, not just in football, but in boxing as well. Boxing especially, it's all about image, isn't it? The image is so important to them. Like they are really trying to portray this image and trying to create an environment whereby they're seen as one of the sporting superpowers. And they probably look at this type of thing and think, right, look, whether we get the player or not, us being said to be in the mix, it keeps us relevant. It keeps our our nation in the conversation. It keeps our league in the conversation. It's all good PR. And I think there's a part of that as well. And I think we're experiencing that this summer, where we've got a lot of players being linked to the Saudi Pro League that will just not go there. It's a PR stunt. It feels like that to me. So not worried about Sesko at this stage, not concerned in any way, really. I think that Arsenal and Leipzig will eventually strike up a deal. I'd like it to be done sooner. But again, I've made this point before and I'll make it again. Whether they come in tomorrow or whether they come in 2 weeks' time, it doesn't really make that much of a difference, does it? We need the players in my opinion, at the start of pre-season or as early into our pre-season as possible. And that pre-season training begins early July. So we've got another 20 odd days before we've, got to start thinking about rushing them in for pre-season. And the point I'm making is, you sign Sesko today, he'll be on his holidays and you're not going to see him until July anyway. So if you want to use that time to try and negotiate the best possible deal, then that's not the wildest approach to take, is it? So I don't really understand why people are so anxious about it. It's just because we keep getting these, and I'm partly to blame for this as well, but it's because we keep getting these like little tidbit updates that don't really mean nothing. And you're providing the update, and then the next day you're thinking, okay, are we going to get that Ornstein post or that Fabrizio Romano shout that kind of suggests or highlights some progress that's been made? And then it doesn't. And then, you're like, oh, what's going on with this? And then you read something like Saudi are interested. It's a whole up and down type roller coaster type thing, isn't it? The transfer window. So I get it, but just stay as chilled as you possibly can would be my advice to you. Anyway, really, really short pause. When we come back, we're going to talk Rodrygo. We're going to touch on our main story.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou, and we are talking all the latest Arsenal transfer rumours. If you haven't done so already, leave a like on the video. There's over 500 of you with me live right now, but we are nowhere near that in terms of likes. They don't cost a thing. They really, really do help. Smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel as well if you're new. And if you're listening on audio, Apple or Spotify, get involved. If you want to become a patron, you can do that as well. The link is in the description. You get all our episodes ad-free, plus you get bonus episodes over there as well. And you'd be supporting me to bring you more content here on the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Before I dive into the main story, just a quick heads up. If you're not subscribed to the audio feed, get subscribing, because tomorrow's episode will be the last live one just for a couple of days, just until Sunday. I'm off to Greece. I'm going out there tomorrow. I've got a wedding on Friday. I'm spending Saturday there, and I'm coming back on Sunday. So, yeah, I'm going to go and enjoy the wedding. It's the wedding of a very dear friend of mine, and I'm also going to have a bit of sun and have a bit of a break. So I'll be on standby if anything major drops, but otherwise I probably won't be doing too much, to be honest with you. But if we do something, if something does break while I'm on the beach sunning myself, it's much easier for me to just quickly record an audio podcast and get that out straight away than it is for me to create a setup and do a video. So there's a good chance that if anything drops over the course of those 2 days while I'm away, you're going to get an audio episode only. So yeah, just a little heads up on that. Sorry, the standards are dropping, I know, but I'm only going for a couple of days. So yeah, let's have you all subscribed over there. Okay, let's get into this Rodrygo stuff. You would not believe how many messages I've had from friends and from, family members and colleagues and all sorts who are saying, like, well, what do you think of this Rodrygo stuff, Harry? Like, is it real? Is it happening? And there's a lot of people that seem to be convinced that it is. Let me tell you what I know about the Rodrygo stuff, and then I'll get some of you guys' thoughts and comments from the live chat on this. I'll take your questions as well. I think the interest in Rodrygo is real. I think Arsenal admire the player. Who doesn't? Most of Europe does. And I think Arsenal do look at him as the type of player that, were he to become available, he's the level of player that they would simply need to be in the mix for. They would simply need to be in the mix for him. But I am reluctant to believe some of the reporting over the past 24 hours. There's been so much to the effect of Rodrygo's not happy. Xabi Alonso's told him he's not part of his plans. Rodrygo's been posting things on social media that don't exactly suggest that he's got the hump, and don't exactly point to him being so disillusioned with life at Real Madrid that he's desperate and pushing for a move. However, things can change. We've known throughout this whole Rodrygo conversation that no decision on the player was going to be made pre the Club World Cup. So let's see what happens in the Club World Cup. And I think from there, he'll probably get an understanding of what his role looks like, and what, his future might look like. I said it from the very beginning when these rumors first surfaced. We only get Rodrygo if Rodrygo really wants to leave Real Madrid, because as a young Brazilian lad who finally got his kind of big move over to Europe and to Real Madrid specifically, the biggest club on the planet, that's not something he's going to want to just give up. And even if there was a feeling of underappreciation and a frustration under Carlo Ancelotti, well, he's not the manager anymore. So if you've got your dream move to Real Madrid, you wouldn't throw that all away, would you? Based on Carlo Ancelotti, now that Carlo Ancelotti's gone. Xabi Alonso might be giving a completely different message to Rodrygo. He might feel valued. He might feel cherished. He might feel like he's got a huge role and part to play in Xabi Alonso's new iteration of Los Blancos. To do this deal, people have been saying, well, at Madrid, it's not the manager that calls all the shots, and that someone like Florentino Perez could easily turn around tomorrow and say to Xabi Alonso, sorry, we're selling Rodrygo. We need the money, or we want the money to fund X deal. There's been a lot of talk about Franco Mastantuono. There's a lot of talk about him. And, Real Madrid might turn around at some point and go, Rodrygo's better as a left winger. We've got Vinicius Jr. and we've got Kylian Mbappe, who quite likes to play from that position as well. We don't really need to keep a hold of Rodrygo, especially when there's a club out there that are willing to pay 70, 80 million quid to sign him. I just think this is so heavily dependent on the player. And none of the messages that we're getting from the player, whether that be directly or indirectly via social media posts or whatever, suggest that he's miserable and fed up of life at Real Madrid and desperate for a move. So on that basis, I don't see this as a deal that's imminent. Some people are reporting that Xabi Alonso has sat down and written out what his best 11 is and has presented it to the players, and Rodrygo's not in that. Therefore, he'll want to move. Again, we've got no evidence to suggest that that is true. So I'd love the player to come to Arsenal. We know that Arsenal like him, but they like all good players. It's impossible not to like him because he's that level of footballer. But first and foremost for me, this rides on the wants of the player. And not only do you need to convince the player, not only does the player have to be on board, but you then need to go and strike a deal with Real Madrid, who I'd imagine are going to be quite difficult to deal with, given that they're in a power position here. So, yeah, that's my take on the Rodrygo stuff. I know we like him. I know I like him. I know I'd love to see him sign for Arsenal, but I haven't seen anything yet to give me real encouragement that this is going to happen. So there's no point in getting carried away with this, in my opinion. I just don't think that's the right way to digest this story right now, because what we're being fed is not, it's not credible enough for me. It's just not. So that's my view on it at the moment. Would I love to be proved wrong and see Rodrygo holding up an Arsenal shirt? Of course I would. But I'm just being honest about it. Anthony says, Harry, love the show, but sorry, you're always a Debbie Downer. You can't see Rodrygo or Williams happening and don't want Leao. So who do you want? I'm being a Debbie Downer, no offense to anyone called Debbie, because I don't think the reporting around Rodrygo right now is credible. And I'm not talking about reporting that says Arsenal are admirers of Rodrygo. That, for me, is credible. It's all these reports you're getting from overseas and from abroad saying it's done, he's an Arsenal player, or all these ITK accounts behind fake names and fake profile pictures. That's not enough for me. That's not going to get me sort of buzzing and get me sort of jumping onto the back of the hype train. I'm just not at that point with this. I'd love us to sign him, but do you want me to sit here and lie to you? Do you want me to sit and hype him up and make him out to be the best thing since sliced bread, only for everybody to be disappointed and for it to feel like a massive slap in the face when it becomes clear that he's staying at Real Madrid? No. Rumble says Arsenal are in that stage now where they have to sign world class only. If not, this process is signing its true colours. I think we want to sign players that improve us. Yes, of course we do. But I think who is and isn't world class is debatable, isn't it? And I think that, the market nowadays is not, I don't know what it is. I don't know what I put it down to, but this is the first summer I've gone into it where I've looked at like loads of options that we've been linked with. And very, very few of them actually like inspire me. Like I've gone into summers in the past and gone, well, if we get X player or Y player, I'm good with that because I like them both. This summer, it was like, okay, it's Sesko or Gyökeres. And I like them both. But none of them are at that like unbelievable level where I'm just like, just get whichever one you can in. We've been going back and forth on it so much because none of the options are really as convincing, at least based on their history, as we'd like them to be. Some of you are mentioning Bradley Barcola in the chat. Bradley Barcola's great. Olu says, bring Barcola to the carpet and we're cooking. Yeah, I think Bayern Munich have made him a target. And if that is true, then perhaps they believe that a move is possible for Bradley Barcola. If a move for him is possible, then Arsenal have to be waiting in the wings there to at least try. Arsenal have to be there and ready to pounce. So yeah, man, let's see how that goes. What else have we got? Lots of you saying he will stay at PSG. Probably, but Bayern Munich are being linked with him. So my point is that you might not be able to get these deals done. It's not just in your hands. Okay? There's so many factors and so many people involved, and there's so many moving parts to these things. But as a football club, if that level of player is available, you've got to be there and you've got to be asking the question and trying at least. I know some people say trying is not good enough, but you got to be in the conversation is what I'm saying. So yeah, apparently I'm out of order for being a realist. Guna Oz, Harry, how long do you think Arsenal should wait for Rodrygo before shifting our concentration to another left winger? I think they should be working on other options now. Again, unless something's gone on behind the scenes that we don't know about, very, very difficult for me to kind of really get on board with this Rodrygo stuff. I think that we've got to be talking to other people. I think we've got to be looking at alternatives, and I think we've got to be moving because, as I said, by the start of pre-season, I want to have a pretty good picture of what our squad looks like and a great understanding of what our squad looks like, because this is a really, really big season coming up. And I don't want us to get to the last week of the window like we did last summer, knowing very clearly that we still have business to do, and then scrambling around and picking up second-rate options in the way that we ended up doing with Raheem Sterling. We kept our powder dry in January. We didn't really go as big as we probably should have last summer. That was for me because we were waiting for certain targets. And having done what we done in January, which wasn't anything and nowhere near enough, there's no excuse now. We've got to be ready to pounce and we've got to be ready to bring players in. People keep saying to me, why do you keep saying we're not getting Nico Williams? I didn't say we're not getting him. I never categorically said that we weren't going to sign Nico Williams. I said that I think it's going to be a difficult deal to do because his salary is crazy. And I said that, in my opinion, there's no guarantee that Nico Williams comes and is as successful as some people seem to think he will be. He could be, he could work out. But I look at his salary and I'm not sure. I'm not sure about Rafael Leao. And that speaks to what I was talking about earlier on when I say that there are a lot of players out there right now that we are being linked with. And it's not necessarily through fault of our own. It's because of, you go into a summer and you kind of have an idea, don't you, of who from the big clubs is going to be on the move, who of the big names is likely to be available. And then the second question is, where are they going to end up? We went into the summer knowing that Gyökeres was probably going to move, that Sesko was probably going to move, that Nico Williams could move, having been so close to a Barcelona move last time around. We know that there's been a lot of talk about Rodrygo. Okay, I don't think that's as legit as maybe some people would like to believe. But my point here being that I look at those options and none of them are massively convincing. So when you're starting to talk about figures in excess of 75, 80 million quid on top of what we think we're going to pay for that centre forward, it just doesn't feel viable or feasible or something Arsenal could do. I don't know. But I'm just trying to stay relaxed and grounded on this window. And I'm trying not to get sucked in to stories like the Rodrygo story, where, look, some people are very credible and have said that we've got an interest and we like the player. And that is, I believe, true. But, to then sort of start suggesting that this is moving and it's going further down the line and it's developing and all of that, it just feels premature to me. That's just my feel. That's my gut feeling. And that's based on what I've sort of investigated myself as well. So, yeah, that's where I'm at on that. Let's get some of your thoughts and let's get some of your questions from the live chat. I'd love to hear from you guys as well. Let's do that next. Welcome to the final part of today's The Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Let's get into the big stories. Well, no, we've done the stories. What am I talking about? I lost complete track of my thoughts there. Let's go through the chat. Love this. Harry, have you got OnlyFans yet? What do you want? Pictures of my feet? No, not into that sort of thing, man. Let's take some of your comments on transfers and various other bits and pieces as well. Jid says, if we have two equally strong wide attackers in, say, Saka and Rodrygo, do you think it will affect our style of play? Yes, in theory, having two strong flanks is great. But even at Liverpool, the starring flank was Salah, with Mane playing a supporting role. Not a lot of teams have those two starting wide attackers, mostly because teams and styles of play are usually built around the player and a side. I think you're always going to get one of them that ends up being sacrificed in a way. One of them's probably going to have to do a little bit more defensive work or adopt a slightly different position in order to facilitate the team being a little bit lopsided and focusing down one side. And you're right to highlight Liverpool as an example of that. But it can't hurt to have a better quality player on the left-hand side so that when things don't go well down the right and you're not making headway in the way you'd like, you can switch it over and that player can be just as devastating and certainly more devastating than what we currently have. So I think you make a really valid point. I do. But I think the more quality you've got around the pitch, the more options you have, the more ability you have to hurt the opposition. I think we're just lacking a bit of that on the left right now. Capo TV says, do you think Gay is even worth getting if we keep Kivior? Of course, Mark Gay was linked with a move to Arsenal yesterday. He says he prefers a left back so Skelly can move into the midfield as an option. If Mark Gay is gettable at a relatively low price, and we think that will be the case because he's going into the final year of his contract, then I'd certainly explore that, yeah. For sure. Let's move on. Manny says, you're no longer paying for world-class proven talent. It's all based on hope and potential. World football lacks world-class footballers. I do think there's an element of that right now. And I've talked about this before. I think we're in a day and age where systems trump individuals. And because systems trump individuals, some of the individuality of what would have been the world's best players has almost been coached out of them to a degree, or we don't get to see it on show and on display in the way we'd like. So I agree with this. And I think the transfer market has gone crazy in terms of it being much more heavily weighted towards potential than reality right now. Florian Wirtz is a great example of this, right? I think he's a fantastic player. I really do. I think he's really, really good. Every time I've watched him play, I've been really impressed. He's obviously super experienced for someone that's just 22 years old, I think he is. But Liverpool are paying a package worth 150 million euros by the looks of it to get him in through the door. That's like 130, 135 million pounds. That is crazy money. And that is more so based on what he could be than what he is. I know it's partly based on what he is, more so in this case than in other cases, because he's been doing it for a good few years now. There's no question about that in my mind. Like the player, I think he's really talented, I think he's really good. But it just shows you, doesn't it, where you're at. So if you want that level of talent and that level of prospect, then you're going to have to pay that sort of money. And hand on heart, do you feel comfortable paying that sort of money for some of the players that we're being linked with? I don't. And I know people will always push back and go, but it's not your money. Why do you care? I've seen what happens when we overpay for players and when we sign up players on contracts that they're just not worthy of over long periods of time. Not only do we crash in the meantime and in the short term, but we end up burning for the medium term as well because we can't get those players out. That's why I credit Mikel Arteta and Arsenal and Edu with having done such a good job, because we had so many of those players at the club before those guys really kind of took a hold of the situation and started to turn us around. Matt G says, Harry, do you want me to lie to you and tell you Rodrygo is joining Arsenal? Yes, Harry, lie to me and tell me he's joining. I get it, man. I get it. People want to have something to be excited about, but I'm just trying to be realistic about it. Ticking Time Bomb says, does Benjamin Sesko excite you? It doesn't excite me. It doesn't excite me as much as, like, for example, when we signed Declan Rice. But the more I look into the player, the more I study the player, the more we do our sort of scouting bits over on Patreon, the more I think there's a lot in there that we could potentially extract from him. But I understand why people have that reservation. He got 13 goals in the Bundesliga last season. It's hardly been pulling up trees. I get that. I think you have to scratch beneath the surface a little bit to understand a bit more about what his skill set looks like and why that is probably going to fit in with Arsenal quite well and all the things he could bring. But I get why on the surface people are looking at it and going, 17 odd million quid, striker scored 13 goals last season. I kind of get why there's that underwhelming feeling at the moment. But let's give him a chance and see what happens. I'm a real gunner, says Harry. There's never any guarantee in football. Over the years, how many players have flopped and were bought at big transfer prices? Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's no guarantees, but I think you can minimize risk. And I don't think we would be doing that if we went and spent 80 odd million quid or even 60, 70 million quid on the likes of Nico Williams with a major salary, or 70 million on Rafael Leao with, again, a big salary. I think we'd be setting ourselves up for that fall. And I'm not sure that Arsenal are willing to do that as a football club. Henky Ho says, is the problem with the players Arsenal are going for that it's so difficult to find the right player to get those extra percentages to get to the top? It's easy to get from mid-table to top four. I completely agree with that. I've been saying this ever since the summer started. I've been saying that the step we are trying to take now is the hardest step to take. And therefore, when a team is already at a high level, you're looking for players that you're only looking for players. You're only interested in players that are going to improve you. If they're not going to improve you, or there's a doubt about whether or not they'll improve you, then why would you move for them? The pool of players that improve Arsenal, because of Arsenal getting better and better, is getting smaller and smaller. And that makes this a really difficult window. So there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of expectation. There's a lot of, come on, go and do the business, blah, blah. I get all of that. But we also have to realize that this is a really difficult window in that sense as well. So that's why I'm kind of patient, and I'm okay with the club just taking their time and doing the right bits of business rather than just applying a kind of scattergun approach and leaving ourselves with maybe egg on our faces come the end of the next season. So, yeah. AJ says, we are told to wait and wait and wait and wait for major trophies. Why can't the people who tell us to wait give a definitive date as to when major trophies should be expected to arrive? Quite simply, because you can't predict what's going to happen in football. I bet most experts tipped us to win a trophy last season, and we didn't because of a number of circumstances, some that were within our control and others that were not in our control. It's one of my catchphrases. Football is the best sport in the world because it has so many variables, and you can't control all of those variables all of the time. So there will be instances where you do all of the right things and you end up missing out on what your objective was, because you can't control every aspect and every element of football. So if they were to sit, if Josh Kroenke was to come out tomorrow and say, this is the year, guys, we're going to win the Premier League, and then he doesn't, what's the response and reaction going to be to that? All you can do as an owner is put the club in a position to compete over and over and over and over again. And we've done that for the last few years, and the onus is on the players and the manager to get over the line. We haven't been able to do that. Some would argue that if you change the manager or you change some of the players, then we would get over the line. But that is all hypothetical. You don't know that. We're talking in hypotheticals a lot. And in football, you should never talk in hypotheticals because there are so many variables. How can you come up with hypotheticals in a scenario where there are so many variables? You can't. You're setting yourself up for a fall. I think we need to deliver. We absolutely need to deliver in this season coming up. No question about that. I'm not trying to shirk that or brush that under the carpet. We do. But I don't want the ownership to come out and start giving us dates, because that just applies pressure on the players, on the manager, which I don't think is necessarily helpful. I know the pressure is there already, but imagine the pressure if Stan Kroenke told everybody, or Josh Kroenke told everybody, that we're going to win the Champions League next year. Imagine how you'd feel as a player going out in each and every one of those games. There's a line that you need to toe. There's a balance that you need to find in terms of your communication. I think people need to understand that. Okay, guys, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you all so much for joining me on this Wednesday morning. As I say, we'll bring you a live episode tomorrow, but that'll be it might be live, it might be pre-recorded, just depending on how many things I get done today, because I've got a fair few bits to do before I go. It might even be that I record it earlier in the morning and then put it out at 10. Just depends on how my day goes today. But there will be an episode tomorrow. Not sure yet about Friday and Saturday. But if anything major breaks, we will bring you something, maybe a really, really short video, or possibly just an audio only episode. So I'll let you lot know via the community tab here on YouTube as well. Thank you all for your support. If I don't speak to some of you, or you're not tuning into tomorrow's episode, have a wonderful few days, and I'll see you all again on Sunday. Until then, take care of yourselves and have a great day. Up the Arsenal. Goodbye.